Hello everyone. What could be nicer than these gorgeous cosmos from the garden? They're just in full flower now and they're just such a pretty shape. I thought we could do some lovely loose brush techniques. So moulding with the brush. So this is the sort of idea I'm going to go for, and I'm going to fill this area. So I'm going to look at this flower and I'm going to mould it with the brush. The colour I'm going to use is Wild Rose. Move these over here. I like to keep the colours separate, so the Wild Rose, the pink, is going to go into the end compartment, and then if I add blue, I'll kind of add it here. I kind of keep things clean, nice and clean. So this is a gorgeous, gorgeous colour, this Wild Rose, but it's not quite, if we look at it, it's not quite the same as this. I think we need a little blue, so tiny bit of blue, and that will change and become more of a magenta, and it's ultramarine I'm using. So we've now got this lovely magenta colour. Perfect. So I'm going to scoop the brush up and I'm going to look at the shape that the petals make. I'm going to maybe do a flower here. I'm going to look at that petal shape, and I'm just going to place the brush onto the table, onto the paper. If I see it's got a wonky edge, I'm just going to place it a couple of times. Now the centre is going to be somewhere here, so I'm just going to press the brush and bring it into about there. Now I'm just going to leave that. These flowers they actually have 8 petals. Some of them, if this touches, that's okay, because they go behind. There's now a little gap here. I quite like to leave a gap. I'm just splaying out the brush, bring it into the centre. If you imagine, we kind of want to leave some space here for the little yellow centre into that magenta colour again. This might look a little bit bluer, which is good because there's shadows and there's lines and marks on it. But I just want you to think about pressing the brush onto the paper. That'll have a crinkled edge, which is nice. And then just stopping in time to leave a centre. So there's a lovely big petal here facing me. So this time, you can start in the centre or the outer edge, it's really up to you. And then I'm just going to press it and add another stroke here so that you get this lovely rounded shape. Now these petals, they start to drop off as the flower opens. This one's going to go behind. So do you see how I can just see a little of it here? I'm just going to tuck it in there. So that looks like it's behind. We've got 6 petals. There's 8 because none of them dropped off. On this one did drop off. So it doesn't really matter as long as you leave a gap. If you see a gap, leave a gap, but it doesn't really matter if you don't do all of them. A nice big petal here, and you can see it's a gorgeous shape. Now, how am I going to get this lovely movement onto the petals? Now, the petals are still lovely and wet. So with my palette knife, I'm just going to move really carefully. I'm going to coax that paint to move, and I'm using this palette knife to move the paint. Now we did a little lesson in the past painting leaves, and it's exactly the same technique. So I just want to flick the paint. I'm just moving. Now you could turn your paper upside down. That looks lovely. I like that. That one, that's better. So we're getting the shape now. We've got that lovely feel. We're going to let the colours all just blend on the paper. What I'm not going to do now is start messing with that. If I want to put some dark lines on, I'll put them on later. So that's my first little bit of colour. So now what I'd like to do is a little bit of yellow in the centre. If the yellow touches any of the pink and it's wet, I'm going to use this lovely Sunlit Gold. If it touches that, do you know, it will run. So you can let it dry, or you can just be a little bit daring and let it run. And of course, so I'm just using the pointer brush for this. So a little of the pink could run into it, or it could run into the pink, and that's quite nice. So I don't mind that. So just tap, tap, tap. You can even soften a few edges like this by just, if it's dried, that's even better. You could just soften a bit. So that's going to be the centre. So I'm going to put another little flower, this little one, this, I don't know if you can't really see it from your angle, but it's a little pale one. I might suggest this very pale one here, but I think this one I'm going to put here, not out here, sort of here. So I want, you imagine this is going to be the centre, something like that. And now I want these petals to go towards the centre, and I want them to look, well, they're quite, it's on the side, so you can see they're almost little, there's a little heart shape almost on the edge, which is quite sweet. So I'm just going to go into the pink again. We'll move this out of the way, into the blue. So same two colours. And this time I'm just going to, so I'm aiming for here. It's a smaller flower, this. So I'm just going to do a couple of little lines like this, because that's going to be the edge of the petal. And then I'll just bring it in like that. Into the pink. I feel like it's a little bit purple. So I've dipped my brush into another colour. So we'll just have, I only see two here, into the centre. So I'm going to do this quite quickly, moulding the brush. This I can't even see because it turns over. So really look and see what the shapes are. And they're really quite lovely and not necessarily what you would imagine. There's a kind of a wonky shape here. So anything goes. So how many have we got? 2, 4, 6, 7. Only got room for one more. So I'll just put, make sure you don't have too many. Too little is okay, but you don't want too many. Now what I'd quite like to do is just flick a little bit. I know it's quite daring, but you know, it does look painterly, doesn't it? It looks quite arty. I quite like to do that. Now, a little bit of yellow in the centre again. Now this will run. Now what we haven't done, which we must do while it's wet, is move the paint. See, I'm getting carried away. This is what happens, you get carried away because watercolour is such fun. Let's move this. I really love this technique, it's so simple. It works better or easier on smooth paper. So I'm using a hot pressed watercolour paper. However, it also works on a not surface paper, which is slightly textured. Into the centre now. Just dot dots. They will just kind of merge out. But I really love that. Look at those lovely shapes. So I'm happy with that. Let's just put a few leaves in to get the feel of this. So round brush, clean it out. Right, into the pale leaves are sunlit green. No, I'm going to use country olive. Into the country olive. And the darker leaves are the midnight green. So just into the country olive. And I'm going to think of where I want these leaves to go, because there's nothing on the paper. I'm just kind of getting a feel of a pattern on the page. So if I look at that sweep there, I kind of want the idea. Let's have a little stem coming this way. Sort of this way, what do you think? I think that would look quite nice. And then we'll put some little soft coloured leaves. Barely touch the paper and press. Barely touch the paper and press. And if that touches and it runs, do you know, I'm going to let that go. Now we can leave that and put a dark vein on later, or while they're wet, we can just suggest a little light vein. That is my little dog barking. Somebody has dared to walk past again. Now, let's make the next leaves a little darker, so into the midnight green. So what we're doing now is we're creating a different tonal value, just because it will be more balanced. Press and lift. I'm going to ignore that. It'll probably be somebody wanting to sell me something. Press and lift. So those leaves are just lovely. Okay, little curve here. And then palette knife. Now it's very warm today, so it's drying quite quickly, but we can leave that, put another layer on the top and put some more paint on. What we can also do is add a shape on the outer edge. We can change what we've got by adding lines. We can add a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to put, I think I want quite a pale leaf here. So this is still the midnight green, but this time there's so much water in it that this little leaf here will be very pale. And then I'm going to add another one here, And that will just kind of link up. And I'll put a dark centre in that one, I think, just because these have got dark centres. And that kind of takes us around, almost like a loop. Quite like that, as like a curve. And then the centres here, if it's dry, almost is. I'll show you how we can do these little bits in the middle. So let's have a leaf here, barely press the paper, and then lift, tuck one in there. So we're just kind of going to bring this, another one here, tuck it in. So you can start to see we're starting to fill this up now. Another one here. And it's all to do with just a pattern and what you feel looks nice on the page. Into the green. And the central bits, these have got these lovely, you see, I don't know if you can see these long bits in the centre. So I quite like to put those on. So with the pointer brush, I just press it and make a little wiggly line. Not on all of the gaps, but because some of these will be behind, but that, it just is a lovely shape. I like that. Now, I also want more little dots in the centre of these, and they are almost dry. So into this lovely sunlit gold, and just tap in the centre of there. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the wild rose. So it's now sort of an orange colour, and we'll just tap in the centre of that. Now, because it's so warm and some of these leaves have dried, I'll show you how, even when it's dry, we can now add another layer of colour. So we put a slightly darker colour on, and I can move the paint again. So with this one, I don't want it to go too dark, but I'm going to create this light line. So palette knife at the ready. Today is 30 degrees. And lift. So just gently press the paper and lift, and you'll see you still get a light line. It will obviously not go back to paper because we've got a colour underneath, but that's okay. So mould with the brush, move the paint with the palette knife, just play with your paints and enjoy using them, and just get something out of the garden that inspires you. Lovely for little cards. These make the most wonderful little cards. So yeah, have a little go. Enjoy.